The implementation of social impact bond projects begins when a commissioner, usually a public entity at the national or local level, identifies a certain social need and target population and enters a contract with the intermediary. After receiving the working capital needed from the intermediary, the service provider delivers a pre-agreed upon set of outcomes. The outcome measurement represents a key element of social impact bonds. The independent evaluator assesses their final level, and only in the case of achievement of the predefined social outcomes does the commissioner provide payments. In summary, the social impact bond structure transfers the risk of poor performance from commissioner to the investors. Investors receive a financial return for taking this risk, as well as a social return through the outcomes achieved. A similar context in South Africa motivated the launch of the country's first social impact bonds, also known as bonds for jobs, in Johannesburg in April 2018. Set to conclude at the end of 22, youth unemployment is extremely high, with the input-orientated skilling system seemingly incapable of delivering jobs. So to unpack more, I'm joined by Panulo, Senior Project Manager and Innovative Finance Analyst from Bertha Centre for Social Innovation and Entrepreneurship. Welcome to Economics Unbound, Barry.
Thank you very much, Kanya. It's a pleasure to be here.
First question, what are the challenges of developing a social impact bond that's actually unique to the South African economy?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So in SA and other emerging countries, really, we find challenges linked to the scope of development issues faced and the lack of track record amongst service providers. So as background, the first social impact bonds were used in developed countries, notably the United Kingdom and the USA. These are relatively well-resourced geographies where the outsourced portion of public services programs, be it job placement or the prevention of homelessness, are only required by tens or hundreds of individuals. The service providers in these markets, be they nonprofit organizations or social enterprises, also have more information on the outcomes or impact they are capable of achieving. This helps give investors confidence that the social impact bond is likely to be a success and repay their initial investment. Unfortunately, these assumptions do not hold as well in South Africa. Firstly, the problems are larger. For instance, whilst the UK only has a 5% unemployment rate, ours is over 30%. And running with that example, a South African employment-focused impact bond will be tackling a problem that is harder and needs to deliver change on a broader scale than that in a comparable developed country context. So this observation generalizes to other sectors and means that a lot of the programs that we're tackling are much more difficult to move the needle on. Track record is also an issue, and most South African service providers only monitor information on service provision. The lack of track record around their impact in particular makes it more difficult to convince investors to provide them with the necessary working capital to work under an impact bond.
Yeah. So what have been the main drivers and enablers for the social impact bond in the South African economy?
Yeah, so social impact bonds are intended to help government transition from being a buyer of services to a buyer of impact. And this helps ensure that taxpayer money is only paid to the private sector once it has made a worthwhile and verifiable contribution to society. So think more people placed into jobs, more people getting bachelor's quality matric passes and the like. So the first wave of social impact bonds in South Africa has been enabled by governments and donors being interested in supporting the effectiveness of public services and growing the involvement of the private sector in innovating new solutions to difficult social problems. On the other hand, investors and service providers such as NGOs and social enterprises have also taken an interest in social impact bonds. Investors like them because they enable their engagement in impact investing and allow them to contribute positively to South African society. On the other hand, service providers enjoy the operational flexibility that contracting on the basis of results provides, and they are also typically able to access long-term financing through impact bonds.
Okay, so you're an investment professional working to build a market for social investment in Africa, and much of your work touches on government involvement in innovative financing and impact investment. So what tips can you provide rather on engaging government or other outcomes on funders in South Africa?
Yeah, firstly, check if you're the right stakeholder to be engaged in government. Social impact bonds are quite expensive and time-consuming to establish, and they cannot work without having an outcomes payer on board. We do not recommend social enterprises, non-profit organizations, or investors initiate these themselves, but leaders within government or large donor organizations are definitely well placed to initiate them. If you do find yourself needing to engage with government, first conduct further research on outcomes-based contracting and establish why it's the best approach in the circumstances. Secondly, identify where the funds to develop an impact bond or other outcomes-based contract will come from. And that also extends to the funds that you eventually need to pay against the results. If you've done these two things, then you're ready to engage with the relevant government stakeholders on your idea. At that point, you're quite welcome to contact the team at the Bertha Centre as well, and we can introduce you to professional services firms that can help you make that design a reality.
Yeah, one more, Barry. During the time of, since we know that it's the time of COVID-19, so how rather negatively impacted have these social impact bonds been impacted by the coronavirus pandemic?
So it's a two-sided coin, really. On one hand, the social impact bond mechanism gives you a lot of flexibility so that you can respond to black swans like COVID more readily. You can tweak what the payment indicators are. You can look at extending the term of the project if necessary. A lot of the flexibility is built into the mechanism. On the other hand, it can be challenging to deliver a program that perhaps requires face-to-face contact in the context of COVID. So the fundamental assumptions linked to the design of the impact bonds could well have changed during COVID. So we've seen this on some impact bonds where the service delivery has maybe had to be curtailed. We've also seen some other impact bonds where some of the metrics have been adjusted so that instead of, having people attend a physical ECD session, annual childhood development class, then a lot of that can happen virtually instead. So it really goes both ways, but the impact has been somewhat mixed.
Thank you very much, Barry, for joining us tonight here on Economics Unbound. And that was Barry Panulo, Senior Project Manager and Innovative Finance Analyst from Bertha Centre for Social Innovation and Entrepreneurship. That's it from me, and more from my colleague, Pitandoro.
Prudence, thanks very much indeed. Fascinating conversation there. All right, let's